Joseph Oseloka Achuzia was one of the outstanding military commanders to emerge during the Nigerian Civil War. He was known by the moniker Joe A. Red and Hannibal. Achuzia achieved folk hero status among his fellow Biafrans who tried to secede from Nigeria. He was credited with several success stories during the war. When the war ended in 1970, the international media described Achuzia as a legend in Africa and perhaps the greatest guerrilla leader of them all. But over the course of time, doubt began to emerge over the successes attributed to Achuzia. In this edition of Hispo Media, I will take you through the untold story of Joseph Achuzia, the most feared and dreaded hero and villain of the Biafran War. So, let's dive into the details. Please stay with me, Gabriel here. There is little information about the early life of Joseph Achuzia. However, available data reveal that his parents are from communities of Igbo subgroups in the Midwest region. His father hailed from Asaba, a town dominated by the Anyoma people, while his mother was of the Eza tribe in Igbo heartland. His precise date of birth is uncertain, but recent sources reveal that he was born in 1928. So, at the time of his death in 2018, he was 90 years old. The level and extent of his formal education while in Nigeria is also in doubt. But when Achuzia arrived in Britain as a stowaway in 1950, he informed the authorities that he had studied classics and mathematics at the university in Lagos. Achuzia also made repeated claims that he went to London to pursue a career in law and economics and was to be sponsored by Asaba tribe. Wikipedia described him as a Nigerian-British trained aeronautical engineer. However, there is no evidence that he received training as an aeronautical engineer or as an electrical engineer in London. But as you will see shortly in this video, Achuzia was described by the British police as a former law student in the 1950s. Notwithstanding, as an ambitious young man, Achuzia saw the need to leave Nigeria for London in search of greener pastures. Guys, this is the right time for you to book the like button on this video and subscribe to Hispo Media if you are not done so already. Thank you. In March 1950, Achuzia secretly boarded the Amstelveen passenger cargo vessel in the coast of Africa. He entered the ship probably when the workers were loading the cargo and made his way over the coal bunkers of the ship. He then found a rope store where he concealed himself. Even though the ship was searched as it docked in Dakar, Senegal, Achuzia was not discovered. For the remaining 9 days of the journey, Achuzia survived on only a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. He would explain later, "It was so cold that I was not hungry." On Saturday, March 25, 1950, Achuzia arrived in Plymouth in Britain. On arrival, Achuzia, along with 2 other Gambian stowaways, Khalifa Dreme and Samuel Madden, was allowed to disembark. Having no baggage, all 3 barefooted men proceeded through the gate before about 41 actual passengers came ashore. The 3 were taken to the Ministry of Labour office in Treville Street to sign on and receive the benefit to which other British subjects were entitled. After completing the registration process, Achuzia was taken by a Ministry of Labour Welfare officer to the office of the Council of Social Services, where along with other 2, he was provided with footwear and suitable clothing before arrangements were made to secure them a meal and suitable accommodation. Achuzia made his way to London, where he found lodgings on Randolph Avenue in Maida. He found work as a temporary postman, a job for which he received £4 8 shillings a week. It was while working in this role that Achuzia experienced his first brush with the law. In the early hours of the morning on March 11, 1951, Achuzia was passing the Noah's Ark Public House on Oxford Street in West London when he noticed that a pub nearby had a broken window. He helped himself to a bottle of brandy and continued walking until he was stopped and searched by a police officer identified as Detective Sergeant Hopkins, who proceeded to apprehend him. Hopkins, who had noticed the broken window before Achuzia had passed by, had taken the precaution of counting the number of bottles on the shelf. There were 18 bottles there. He kept a lookout, and after Achuzia had passed by, he recounted them and found only 17 bottles left. He proceeded to overtake Achuzia, who claimed that he had found a bottle on the pavement. His explanation was later rejected by the court. Achuzia was convicted of theft and fined £3. This was not the most auspicious start to life in Britain. At this point, the recorded history of Achuzia goes blank. Two important developments happened in Achuzia's life during this period. First, his marriage to an English woman named Audrey Holt, and second, his relocation to the city of Manchester in northwest England. But the marriage was not a happy union. In March 1954, the Manchester Evening News reported that 24-year-old Audrey Achuzia had been jailed for 3 months. She was jailed for keeping a brothel in Arnold Street in Home, Manchester, and allowing her 4-year-old child to live there. The paper quoted her as telling the court that she and her 2 children had been left in desperate circumstances by her husband. They would have a total of 4 children, but by the late 1950s, they had separated and all children were put in the care of Manchester Corporation. In 1962, he married Josephine Ethel Hayes, who had given birth to their son Simon in 1960. But Achuzia himself lived on the edge and continued to fall foul of the law. In May 1955, he was charged on separate counts of fraud under the Larceny Act for converting to his own use household goods obtained on hire purchase. But Achuzia informed the presiding magistrate F. Bennett Turner that he could not afford to pay for a defense lawyer. His application for legal aid was accepted. However, Achuzia pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a year's imprisonment on both counts, with each of the sentences running concurrently. The next year, Achuzia was on the news again, this time in connection with the homicide of one Anita Marjorie Butcher in an apartment which Achuzia was a known resident owner. Achuzia had discovered her dead body on the morning of August 30, 1956 and called the police. On September 18, Achuzia told the Salford Magistrate Court that he had initially thought that Butcher was sleeping, but then I saw blood all over the place and I ran for the police. The killer was John William Spave, who was later committed to trial for this murder and one other. Though Achuzia played no part in the murder, but the case exposed the fact that he made money from immoral earnings of prostitutes. In 1958, Achuzia had another brush with the law. On December 2, 1958, the Manchester Evening News reported that police had raided the premises of the Students' Social Centre and Silvery Moon Club on Upper Brook Street in Manchester on 3 occasions. The club has been selling drinks to customers into the early hours in contravention of licensing law. Achuzia admitted that he was the owner of the premises but denied the claim that he operated the club. He was fined a total of £78 with the alternative of 3 months jail term. The club was also struck off the register. By the end of the 1950s, Achuzia had become a well-known figure to the Manchester police. But at his trial for attempting to obtain a car logbook by false pretense, a police officer told the court that Achuzia was a former law student. After this time, he appears to have kept out of trouble until May 1964, when he was charged with obtaining £300 by false pretense with intent to defraud. But Achuzia's argument that the money was lent to him as a private loan was accepted by the Liverpool County section. By the middle of the 1950s, Achuzia had got tired of Britain and the burden of his tainted reputation. He made the decision to return to Nigeria with the intention of establishing a business. His business, Electrical Power Engineering Limited, specialized in the manufacture and installation of electrical components in domestic and industrial settings. It was located in the city of Port Harcourt. According to Achuzia in his Civil War memo, by the time Nigeria's trouble broke out in 1966, the company had branches in every major town in the eastern and the midwestern regions. Life was good with Achuzia until Nigeria descended into crisis in 1966. On January 15, 1966, a group of middle-ranking officers staged a coup that toppled the civilian government in Nigeria. The coup also led to the death of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, the Premier of the Northern Region, and the Premier of the Western Region, as well as many senior army officers. Major General Agui, who took over, was unable to stabilize the country. On July 29, 1966, he was overthrown and murdered, along with over 300 men and officers of Igbo ethnicity. This was followed by anti-Igbo pogrom in northern Nigeria and the subsequent declaration of Biafra in 1967. Looking on from his base in Port Harcourt, Achuzia admitted to having the attitude of a disinterested observer watching a tragic drama of life and death unfold before him. But all this would change after his meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Ogbugo Kalu. One of his earliest contributions was to assist in clandestine purchase of weapons from Europe. Secondly, Achuzia was to deploy his company's production capacity in servicing the yet-to-be-declared Biafran army. He was later introduced to Colonel Ejike Agbanwa, who became the head of Biafran Agency for Research and Production. From here, they began to produce improvised explosives. In July 1967, the newly promoted Major General Yakubu Gowon declared a police action against Biafra. By mid-July, the northern sector of Nsukka fell, and on the 25th of July, the 3rd Infantry Division successfully landed in Bonny. The plan was to encircle Biafra. In August, Ojukwu made the decision to order the invasion of the Midwest in order to relieve pressure from the north. By this time, Achuzia had joined the Biafra militia created by Lieutenant Colonel Ogbugo Kalu in Port Harcourt. He played a key role in the invasion of the Midwest along with Victor Banjo, who was later summarily tried and executed for treason. Much later, Achuzia was tasked with arresting Biafran soldiers whose loyalty was considered a suspect. He had made an attempt to arrest Lieutenant Colonel Adewale Ademoyega. Meanwhile, in October, Achuzia set up his operational headquarters of the 11th Battalion in Asaba. But the 2nd Division, led by Murtala Muhammad, entered Asaba at Opanam in the city's north end and confronted Achuzia's forces at St. Patrick's College. On October 4th, Achuzia ordered his men to retreat to Onitsha, and the next day, the bridge was blown off. Achuzia was now given the responsibility of defending Onitsha from possible attempts by federal troops to cross the Niger River. But Murtala Muhammad's 2nd Division decided to adopt a seabound crossing into Onitsha. By the time the federal troops landed on the other banks of the river, the Biafran soldiers of the 11th Division withdrew from the center of the city. But instead of pressing the advantage by pursuing the retreating Biafrans, the federal soldiers proceeded to loot and burn down Onitsha market. This gave the Biafrans time to regroup. From a vantage point at the timber yard of the Ministry of Works, Achuzia, who was commanding the 11th Battalion of the 11th Division of the Biafran Army, had watched the soldiers landed and disembarked. Achuzia's 11th Battalion and Colonel Asam Osudo's 18th Battalion proceeded to surround the Nigerian soldiers, many of whom were either killed or taken prisoner. Undeterred, Murtala Muhammad selected a fresh batch of 5,000 men to make a second crossing to Onitsha. But many of them were cut down in a hail of bullets fired from gun nests and artillery rounds from the east bank of the river. Muhammad stubbornly continued to ignore advice not to make a direct crossing, and the 3rd attempt predictably ended in calamity. The battle to defend Onitsha was a personal success for Achuzia. Impressed by his effort, Brigadier Conrad Nwanwo, the divisional commander, recommended to Brigadier Alexander Madibo, the Biafran Army Chief of Staff, that Achuzia be commissioned into the Biafran Army. Achuzia was subsequently commissioned as a major. It was a decision which Madibo would later reflect on as the greatest mistake of his career. While other Biafran soldiers such as Alexandra Madibo and Ben Bule hold scathing appraisals of Achuzia, Ojukwu continued to favor him. He was deployed to almost every sector of the war. And in January 1968, Achuzia was appointed Divisional Operations Officer for the Biafran's 11th Division. One effect of this appointment was to effectively subordinate Brigadier Nwanwo to him. And in a complete reversal of fortune, Nwanwo became Achuzia's Chief of Staff. Another implication of this appointment was that it enabled Achuzia to directly report to Ojukwu, bypassing Nwanwo within the division and Madibo at Army headquarters. In another success story, Achuzia was said to have initiated the idea of the Abagana ambush, which was successfully executed by Major Jonathan Uchendu. Disputant Biafran commanders such as Madibo claimed that Achuzia should not have taken credit for the operation in Abagana. However, a number of evidences point to Achuzia as having conceived of the operation, which was carried out by Major Uchendu, who of course fell under the divisional control of Achuzia. It was around this time, in the aftermath of the Abagana ambush, that Achuzia earned the moniker Hannibal after the Carthaginian general. Achuzia was involved in almost every sector of the war, too many to mention here, but you can let me know in the comment section if you want a dedicated video about the exploit of Achuzia during the Biafran War. On January 9, 1970, President Odumegwu Ojukwu officially placed all remaining Biafran soldiers under the command of Major Achuzia and gave his Vice President Philip Effiong his title of President. 3 days later, on January 12, Effiong, Achuzia, and other Biafran officers made their way to Amici and later to Owerri to broadcast their final surrender to General Olusegun Obasanjo. But before this time, the federal troops had launched 3 deadly military operations against Biafra, as shown in the video displayed here. So don't forget to book the like button on this video and subscribe to Hispo Media if you have not done so already. It will go a long way to help us with the algorithm. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.